This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so hi guys, friends, whatever. My name is Laura. I'm the head librarian in the Information Technology Department here at Mercer County Library System. We have Anna here from our Hopewell branch who's going to be joining us this evening as our co-host. And the program we're bringing to you tonight is Being LGBTQ in NJ, A History of a Community, and GAAMC. Before we get started, I'm just going over a few things from a technical perspective for you. We ask that you leave your cameras off and mute your microphones to reduce distractions and bandwidth use during the presentation so we can hear all of the presenters. The questions can be directed to all of us via chat. If you look to the chat bubble to the right of your screen, you'll see it there. While we won't be dealing with questions during the presentation, you can add the questions at any point in time as they come up so you don't have to remember them for the end of the presentation. At the top of your screen is also a view control, which you now are probably seeing something that says view everyone. You can choose it to view who's talking, or you can just view active cameras. I suggest you use view who's talking because that way then you'll only be focusing on the speaker, and since we'll have multiple speakers during the event, they can pop in and out as they come on screen, so you won't be stuck with everybody who's got an active camera. Just a reminder, as you might have heard when I started, this program is being recorded. That's in accordance with our agreement with the presenters today, but we also do ask out of courtesy that you not, to the presenters and the fellow attendees, that you not record it on your own or distribute the contents in any way, shape, or form without written prior consent from the library system and the presenters. The recorded version of this will appear on the Mercer County Library System's YouTube channel. So I'm going to turn it over to Anna now and fade screen left here.
Thank you so much, Laura. And I want to thank you, everybody, for coming this evening. As we all know, June is Pride Month, and I am so excited about this program this evening. It has been a true joy talking with the members, and just with the amount of enthusiasm and something that I believe is very underreported with history throughout the world, the United States, New Jersey. I'm very excited to hear the information that they're going to share this evening. I think it's an important part of our history. And I want to remind everybody that before we get started tonight, that our summer reading program has started. I'm going to put the link into our chat, so please feel free to register for the summer reading program. There will be prizes this year, and there's more. I mean, reading in itself is a prize, but you can also log your books to get some prizes as well. So without further ado, I'm going to pass off the program to our presenters tonight, who are members from GAAMC, and they will be introducing themselves. And thank you so much again.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gordon Sauer, and I'm president of GAAMC, and I've been a member of GAAMC since 1978. And I can say that I and the other presenters are absolutely thrilled to be here tonight to be able to share with you the following. You can see down there, it says, From Closet to Community, A History of LGBTQ plus Rights and GAAMC. And presenting tonight, we have three folks. We have Len Resto, we have Mickey Suter, and we have Sherry Race, all of whom are members of GAAMC. Also, as was mentioned before, we will have a time for questions and answers. If you could put any questions you have in the chat, that would make it just a little bit easier to access them, but that will occur, as I say, after the presentation. So, with no further ado, I will turn the mic over to Len Resto.
Thank you, Gordon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending. We're really pleased to have this opportunity to share Pride with you, and looking forward to your questions. So if you can go to the next slide, the first one. Thank you. So Pride is a term that began more than 50 years ago, and it's a term for a movement. You know, the movement is still growing, and Pride is, taking a special pride in our journey as an oppressed minority of an LGBTQ plus community that 50 years ago was discriminated against, barred from all different things, to where we are today. And that's what we're going to cover this evening. Next slide. So in the 1970s and prior, one of the things that New Jersey was good at was that they were at the very forefront for change. Because at the time it was illegal to congregate even in bars. So you couldn't go to a quote gay bar and legally congregate because the police could raid it and arrest you. The term homosexual was the word that was used to describe the LGBTQ community, and it was considered a psychiatric condition. As a matter of fact, there was even a diagnosis code for being homosexual, and it was widely believed that that was a lifestyle choice, not an orientation, and that somehow you could be cured of being a homosexual. And there were no legal protections against discrimination. So if you were, let's say, a teacher or you're a librarian or any profession, and your boss was suspecting that you were gay, that was reason for termination. They didn't have to explicitly say, we are laying you off or we're letting you go because you're gay, but that was the reason. And there were no legal protections for you to come back and charge otherwise in order to try to get your job back. So it really ended up affecting and ruining many careers and many families. Go to the next slide. So this is a clip from our archives, a November 1967 news article that appeared in the New York Times. And it was when the New Jersey State Supreme Court, and one of the first states to do this, they overturned the ban on homosexuals in bars. So now it was legal in New Jersey to congregate at bars. You simply could not be arrested and charged for being at a bar because you happen to be gay. The court decided that that had absolutely nothing to do with where you attended anything. And they passed this ruling, which really was the beginning of what became in New Jersey to be our pride moment. Go to the next slide, please. So when you think of the pride movement, you probably have heard of the Stonewall Uprising. The Stonewall Inn was a bar in New York City in Greenwich Village that was a popular place for gays to congregate, as were many other bars. And it was routinely the practice to raid these bars and arrest gays for congregating. And on a particular night in June of 1969, the police decided to raid the Stonewall Inn. Now, why did they do that? Well, it was an election year, and the mayor of New York was John Lindsay, who you may recall or have read in history books, very progressive mayor, a very liberal mayor, but he was running against two opponents as an independent that were very, very hard on crime. And so the mayor had to appear equally tough on crime. And so he decided, well, what better way to exhibit his toughness on curbing crime than to raid a gay bar? And so they did. But little did they realize that the gay congregation that was at this bar was going to fight back, and they fought back like hell. They actually ended up with a 5-day riot, 5 nights of rioting. And during the actual raid, there were a group of about a dozen policemen who were trapped between the entrance to the Stonewall Inn and exits in the back, and they actually were barricaded in a restroom of all things. And go to the next slide, please. So in the 1970s, the Gay Activist Alliance was founded in New York City, and it was founded by dissident members of the Gay Liberation Front. And then we're going to have Mickey talk about GAAMC, that was formed in 1972, and other chapters were formed but have since disbanded. And I'll now pass it over to Mickey.
Okay, next slide. Okay, in early 1972, there were a number of organizations in New Jersey. Some of them used the name Gay Activist Alliance after the group in New York that was probably the most well-known in the community. So that was the name that was chosen just for name recognition. There was the Gay Activist Alliance of New Jersey, which met in Paramus. There was the Gay Activist Alliance of Essex County, which met in Orange. And then there was also a GAA of Hudson County. Three friends and I started GAAMC in 1972. We'd been going to other organization meetings. We lived in Western Essex or Eastern Morris County. There was nothing in our area, so we just wanted to make friends in our area. We wanted to create a community, to have a safe space to meet, socialize, plan activism. We contacted the Morristown Unitarian Fellowship and somehow convinced them to allow us to meet there. There were a bunch of young, long-haired kids, and didn't think we'd have a lot of credibility with us, but they took a chance on us and allowed us to meet there. We provided community services. Building a community was really what we were all about in the beginning. There was no community, so we started a newsletter in 1974. It was called Challenge, published monthly. It had information on upcoming events at GAAMC, what was happening in New Jersey, what was happening around the country. We organized outings, social events. We had camping trips, road rallies, picnics, social nights at the Unitarian Fellowship, dances, parties. We also started a hotline in the mid-70s, which people could call just to talk to someone or to get information on bars, businesses, services available to LGBT people. Next slide. Okay, we have met nearly every Monday night since 1972. We have a variety of programs. We have political activism. We have holiday barbecues and dinners. We have shows like the $1.98 Beauty Pageant, which was an annual event for nearly 30 years. Educational meetings on topics of interest. We had panel discussions, group discussions, also had a lot of speakers come talk to us. We were very lucky to be in the New York area, and so much was going on in New York in the beginning of the movement, and we were able to get the leaders of organizations, national and New York organizations, to come out and speak to us. GAAMC has always been a truly safe space. What's said here stays here. We welcome everyone. We encourage everyone to speak their mind, to meet other people, to talk, but also to be respectful of other people. Next slide, please. This is a copy of our newsletter challenge. This one is from 1980. We had just had Congresswoman Millicent Fenwick come speak at one of our meetings. Next slide, please. This is one of our socials. I believe it was in the mid-'80s. It was a Halloween party. Next slide. And this was one of our $1.98 beauty pageants. One of our longtime members was the hostess of most of these shows, Mr. Scarlett O'Hara. Next slide. Okay. In the 70s, we didn't have a lot of political activity. Most people were not into politics, and we were building a community, and most people wanted to be social, but we did have some. In 1974, 3 members of GAAMC went to Trenton to meet with an aide to Governor Byrne to discuss gay issues, which was a first for New Jersey. In 1974, GAAMC joined with the Gay Activist Alliance of New Jersey, GANJ, to have a hold hands demonstration of public visibility and togetherness over the George Washington Bridge. Groups from New York came from their side of the bridge, groups from New Jersey came from our side of the bridge, and we held hands and connected the entire length of the bridge. It was so successful, the next year we repeated it around the Statue of Liberty. We completely encircled the Statue of Liberty with people holding hands. We also started a speakers bureau in the 70s. Most people back then, there was no gay people in the media. There were no TV shows that had gay characters. Most people didn't know anyone who was openly gay. Most people did know gay people, but they didn't know they were gay. So people didn't know anything about what it was like to be gay. So we went out and spoke to church groups, to college classes, to community groups, anyone who was willing to have us come speak, just to share our experiences and let people get to meet real live LGBT people. Show some of the progress that was made in the early days. I remember the very first speaking engagement we had was at a college class, and it was an abnormal psych class. 10 years later, we were speaking to human sexuality classes. I think that's quite a bit of progress in a short time. Next slide, please. In 1976, New Jersey revised its entire penal code and decriminalized sodomy laws, which we didn't even have a hand in that. We didn't even request it, but we considered it to be a great victory. 2 years later, State Senator Joseph Maressa, who was from the Camden area, introduced a bill to recriminalize consensual sexual acts between people of the same sex. Did not recriminalize acts for heterosexual behavior. GAAMC and other organizations campaigned against this bill. We met with the senator, had dinner with him at the Cranberry Inn, impressed him apparently, but he still wanted the bill not so much to penalize anyone as to just stigmatize LGBT people. He wanted to, he thought he could discourage people from becoming LGBT. We wrote letters, we lobbied in Trenton, and as a result, the bill was withdrawn. In 1977, GAAMC and GANJ held a protest on the Morristown Green against Anita Bryant's campaign against gay rights in Florida. That was probably the first time we were on the front page of the newspaper in Morristown, and considered that progress for our organization. And in 1979, GAAMC had 2 busloads of people going to the first national LGBT march on Washington. One of our members was instrumental in organizing that march. He attended a conference in Texas, I believe it was Dallas, representing New Jersey, organizing that march. Next slide. In the early 80s, AIDS emerged. GAAMC sprung into action. We hosted fundraisers. We started New Jersey's first AIDS hotline at St. Michael's Hospital in Newark. The New Jersey Lesbian and Gay Coalition, which had been around since the early 70s, and GAAMC had been instrumental in keeping them around, was able to get a grant to hire someone to do AIDS education. And an early GAAMC member who was a nurse was hired as their first full-time educator on LGBT issues and AIDS. Next slide, please. In 1983, GAAMC held its first United Conference. This was a full day of speakers, workshops, and ending with a dance at night. It was held every year for 12 years. Then in 1985, we published our first Pride Guide. It was an annual publication, a resource manual of organizations, businesses, and professionals catering to our community. In 1989, GAAMC formed GALY, Gay and Lesbian Youth of New Jersey, which was for young people ages 16 to 21 to address their special issues. There were originally 3 chapters of GALY, one in Trenton, one in South Orange, and one in Teaneck. The ones in Trenton and Teaneck eventually spun off into their own organizations. GAAMC continued sponsoring GALY in South Orange. Next slide, please. This is an assortment of GAAMC memorabilia. There is the current GAAMC t-shirt right in front, in the center. That's our logo today. In the upper left is another issue of Challenge in a different format. Over on the right is one of the early issues of New Jersey Pride, which became the Pride Guide. And then at the top is a mug with our original logo, which was the outline of the county and the name of the organization. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sherry Race, and she will take it from here.
Thanks, Mickey. Folks, I just want us to take a big stretch because you've been sitting and you've been listening to a lot of stuff. And if you would please advance the slide. Awesome. I just want to put you in the Wayback Machine for a moment, okay? Telephones were wired and they had little punchy buttons, which was an upgrade in technology from dials. Can you imagine? If we wanted to get money and didn't want to go into the bank, we went to a drive-up window, and we did not have a very powerful computer with a camera in it on our hip. This was a time when if you wanted people to know about something, you pretty much had to print it out and distribute it widely. So think about what it must have been like to organize events when you couldn't put them on Facebook, Twitter, or Insta, when you couldn't TikTok a fun message out there. And think about how far we've come, even in the years from Stonewall to the 1990s. Now, if you think about the environment in New Jersey, I want to mention that New Jersey has one of the oldest laws against discrimination on the books. The first incarnation of that law was put into effect in 1947, when a host of people who had served in World War II came home and they said, you know what? We don't want what was going on in Germany to happen here. So they've put that first law in place. And in 1991, throughout the years from 1947 to 91, we have been adding protections. So when we talked about being in the forefront in New Jersey of inclusion and diversity and equity and justice, this is where it comes from. We have our pedigree naturally. Garden State, we grow these things. And so in 1991, a group called the A634 Task Force mobilized and lobbied lawmakers to ban discrimination due to sexual orientation. And when this happened, if you remember from your civics class, something goes into effect, it's signed into law, and it's got a year before implementation occurs because it's brand new and we have to figure out what it looks like and how we're going to put it into practice. And in 1992, the New Jersey Lesbian and Gay Coalition was the umbrella group in New Jersey that gay groups from Cape May all the way up to High Point would gather in New Brunswick once a month to meet. And so when that group met, there were two committees in that group that you may be familiar with the work of these committees when they spun off today. One was Jersey Pride, the producers of the statewide Pride celebration that's held in Asbury Park, usually the first Sunday of June. This year it couldn't be held because we weren't sure that everyone would be up to full immunity. And so look for Jersey Pride's 30th celebration to happen October 10th. The second group was what became the Pride Center of New Jersey that's based in Highland Park these days. And if you want to know more about that, that's the grist for another mill, a story for a different time. In 1992, when Jersey Pride was founded, GAAMC member David Morris, whom you've heard a lot about and you'll continue to hear a lot about, he's one of the giants, like Mickey, on whose shoulders we stand. And he was an attorney who conducted sensitivity training for the New Jersey State Police, one of the first kinds of sensitivity training in the United States. Now again, gay was not always a happy thing. There were men who were targeted at rest stops, and David Morris, as an attorney, protected theirs and everyone's civil rights. That led to his relationships with the New Jersey State Police, and his conducting sensitivity training has influenced generations of officers and what they do today. In 1994, Governor Christine Todd Whitman proclaims June as Pride Month in New Jersey. GAAMC and other activist groups were instrumental in meeting with her and her people to make that happen. Now, remember, there is not a whole lot of internet going on, and if you could access it, then you had to, what's that word? Dial up and listen to a tone, and eventually it would connect you. But in 1996, GAAMC was the only game in town. And so our membership peaked at over 400 members. And our weekly Monday evening meetings, regularly 200 plus. Now, if you've been to the Morristown Unitarian Fellowship, you know it is a converted mansion from the early 1910s. And we filled it from first floor to the rafters and rang those rafters out. We were chock full, and we had pert near all 400 members when we had our $1.98 beauty contest, when we had our annual socials. Imagine coming to a Thanksgiving dinner that's a potluck where everyone brings their best, because on that Monday night before Thanksgiving, we are surrounded by chosen family. And for those people who were going into the Lion's Den on the fourth Thursday in November, it meant a lot to build up some armor and good vibes and positivity. Now, from 400 members on the books and 200 regular members on a Monday night, in 1999, a couple of things happened. One was I feel like I should be in a rocking chair right now. For those of us who remember when Ma Bell was one big company, there was an antitrust lawsuit that broke everything out, which is why we have so many different telephone companies today. AT&T had a very robust, what we would call today, employee resource group, or ERG, but back then they just called it their employee group of LGBTQIA plus people and their allies. And a lot of the GAAMC members were mature in their careers, and when those breakups happened, they were sent all over the country. You can imagine what that did to our membership. Also, with the rise of the internet, that meant a couple of things. You've heard the old phrase, no one on the internet knows you're a dog. And so people felt that they didn't need a well-lit, safe place to meet anymore. They could just sit in the comfort of their living room or wherever their desk was and have conversations with people. And the pendulum swings one way, swings the other way, but it always seeks a balance. And today, GAAMC's membership is around 100 people. Next slide, please. This is a picture from a newspaper at the early days of marriage equality. Now, when we were first starting to work on marriage equality, I confess that was one of my very first experiences in activism here in New Jersey. And we consider marriage equality now to be the law of the land, right? But in the beginning, it was God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, and there was no way that we were going to be endangering marriage for people. And so we rolled our sleeves up and did what New Jersey people do, and we got to work. So there were two schools of thought at that time. One was you can either have domestic partnership or civil union because people will never give us marriage. The second branch, which is the one we pursued, said, you know what, this is going to be stepwise progress, and however long it takes, it will take. And so we worked on domestic partnership, and then we worked on civil union, and ultimately we were successful in getting full marriage equality. But imagine what that was like. If you've ever done lobbying, you know that you go and you talk about a particular issue. But we were intellectually and physically mobilized. There's a GAAMC member whose name is Steve Mershon, and he opened his home to us for us to create and collate content for loose leaf binders that had everything from economic impact statements to the real life stories of people whose lives would be changed forever by being able to be legally married. And we even had one of our contacts knew someone at UCLA who was an economist who put together that economic impact study to show that having everyone be equal in marriage would actually bring money to the Garden State. And if you've ever sat in Trenton in that mezzanine, imagine it packed with everybody who could be there on that day. And we were watching that vote happen. And the lights, one by one, were lighting and were in our favor. And in our hearts, there were fireworks when that first domestic partnership law passed. Next slide, please. Now, Mickey mentioned that we've been in the paper several times, and unlike the old school people who said you should only appear in the newspaper twice, when you're married and your obituary, we said, no, 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 no. You are going to, if this is the way people learn about people, this is where you're going to learn about us. So in Lifestyle, in the Morris County Record, they profiled two of our members. In the upper right is the Venerable David Morris, and in the lower left is Bill Cox. Now, you've heard a lot about David, so let me tell you a little bit about Bill. Bill and his partner, Ken, didn't meet until after each of them had lived a first lifetime. Each of them had been married, each had kids and grandkids. And when each of them was widowed, they said, you know what? this is the time when I'm going to live all of myself. They met, they were a dedicated couple, and Ken was a beautiful writer, and Bill was an excellent actor, performer, would recite in a beautiful orotund voice, and was just a remarkable man. And both he and David agreed to be profiled in this. Now, in order to show people that we are just like everyone else, David said, when I owned a home, crabgrass didn't escape my lawn because I was gay. We are concerned about the same thing as everyone else, about taxes, about deer eating expensive shrubbery, and a good school system. One of the arguments being used against us at that time, against LGBTQIA people, was, oh, well, since they don't have children, they're not interested in paying taxes for schools. And I'll tell you the truth, none of us wants to live in a world with ignorance. Next slide, please. So in 2004, domestic partnership became the law in New Jersey. We were working since the early to mid 90s on that, and we were finally successful. And once we demonstrated that, you know what, when the millennium happened, the world didn't end, and when we got domestic partnership, the world didn't end either. We kept working, and then civil union became law. Not quite the goal yet, but getting much closer. Now, at the same time, federally, we were working on a law called ENDA, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. And for a long time, our trans brothers and sisters were not included. There were lawmakers who were telling them, oh, we'll get this first and then we'll add you. And a lot of us said, that's not going to happen. We all go. We all get it. And so in 2009, trans-inclusive ENDA was introduced by Senator Barney Frank, who was one of the first out legislators in Congress. Now, ENDA in various forms had been introduced in every Congress except the 109th since 1994. And 2015 through today, if ENDA is unfamiliar to you, you may know it more commonly as the Equality Act, which is much beefier. And if you want to get involved in that, contact us and we'll let you know how you can get involved. So imagine in 1992, when we had our first Pride celebration, because the A634 task force people said, you know what, why should we go to Philadelphia for Pride? Why should we go to New York City when we are the Garden State and we can grow it right here at home? So since that time, you know that Gay Pride is commemorated annually with parades, with marches, and a parade is more festive, a march is more political, and also festivals and rallies such as the one in Asbury Park, in Jersey City in August, in Princeton, and there's a North Jersey Pride that's in South Orange Maplewood, and this Saturday there's one in Morristown, as well as New York City and Philadelphia. And Pride is celebrated at different times of the year all around the world. Next slide, please. So here we are. We are out of the closet. We kicked that door down. And in 2008, we had members, Mr. Sue and Mr. Michael, and they spearheaded our effort with Adopt a Highway. And one of our current members said that the very first time he ever knew that GAAMC existed was because of that Adopt a Highway sign that was on one of the roadways that leads into Morristown. Now, what was really humorous about that is when you were heading into Morristown, Adopt a Highway was GAAMC. And when you were headed out, the other side of the highway was adopted by the New Jersey State Police. Now, if you don't think that from heaven, David Morris had a hand in that, I don't know. I'll keep my belief. So imagine. We also had, as Mickey mentioned, our Speakers Bureau with plenty of Gay 101 presentations. Now imagine speaking to a human sexuality class at Rutgers Newark where you have students ranging in age from 17 or 18, just graduated high school, to people who are at the early and midpoint of their careers, to people who are coming back to school at 65 or 70. And a lot of them, even now, think that they don't know any gay people. Or we're there to answer the questions that they may feel shy about asking the gay people in their family. And we are there for them. We still assist with sensitivity training for law enforcement and also with at-risk teens. You know that youth, and especially our trans brothers and sisters who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, are often forced out of their homes, thrown out by their families. And so they are particularly at risk. We do information fairs at college campuses. There was an HIV service organization called the Eric Johnson House that was in the rectory of the Church of Redeemer in Morristown, and we held resource drives for them, for socks, for toilet articles, for the basic necessaries that help a human feel human when they don't have a home of their own. And also a place called Hope House we worked with in conjunction with them. They're a project of Catholic Charities. Next slide, please. In our work with youth, Rainbow Cafe Morris is a group for teens. You know that there's not a lot of resources for youth who are 13 to their early 20s. And Rainbow Cafe took a bit of a hiatus naturally during the lockdown, but they are now back. And JBWS, formerly Jersey Battered Women's Services, we held fundraisers and resource drives for them as well. We have swung a hammer with Habitat for Humanity, and we have volunteered with and gotten volunteers who volunteer with us from the NAACP Morris chapter. We also assist with the South Jersey organization Triad House for displaced youth. Next slide, please. One of our members who has since passed, Paul Greenberg, was very active with AIDS Walk in New York City and was one of their top fundraisers. And here in New Jersey, we have our friends from New Jersey Buddies and also our friends from Hyacinth AIDS Foundation come give a presentation every year so that we have the most up-to-date information. GAAMC participates now in Morristown's annual Community Health Day, and I'll tell you that story on the side sometime, but that came from our involvement with NAACP. There's a group called Wind of the Spirit in Morristown that works with immigrants to this country. And imagine, hard enough to emigrate to this country, but imagine having to flee persecution where you come from and experience something that's not much better in a detention center when you're here. Glisten and Sage are ways that we help work with people at every side and every end of the spectrum. And a lot of us have been adopted by animals from shelters, and especially St. Hubert's and Mount Pleasant have been well connected with GAAMC. Next slide, please. So here we are, a little closer to the present day. In 2015, the United States Supreme Court said marriage equality is going to be the law of the land, legalized everywhere. And that's thanks to James Obergefell and Edie Windsor. And when you think about this, that anyone who loves anyone else can now take care of them, that is a humbling thought. And it took decades of work to get here. When some New Jersey elected official said, I'm not going to perform marriage for those gay people, New Jersey came in and said, you know what? If you're not going to marry everybody, then you can't marry anybody. And let's just talk about this, how important words are. We know representation matters, and words matter too. When the religious right was calling what we wanted gay marriage and talking about Adam and Steve, we pivoted and said same-sex marriage. But you know what? That put the emphasis on sex. When we pointed out to people that love is love and what we want is full marriage equality, we began to gain greater traction. But we didn't stop with marriage equality. We went on to have GAAMC members like our own Gordon Sauer testify before the New Jersey Assembly and the New Jersey Senate for LGBTQ education and history in New Jersey public schools. And as you remember from our civics lesson before, in 2019, that became part of the curriculum. In 2019, Gordon and other GAAMC members testified before the Assembly and New Jersey Senate for LGBTQ elders' rights. Can you imagine working your entire life to live your full, authentic self and have to go back into the closet if you go into assisted living? We said that's not right. And consequently, in 2020, that was signed into law. And in 2020, when the entire world shifted on its axis, GAAMC, who had been meeting in pretty much the same place nearly every Monday night since 1972, created 2 Zoom meetings, one on Mondays, one on Wednesday, so that we could still connect safely to one another. Next slide, please. So here's a picture of a Pride celebration, pre-COVID, obviously, where everyone is shoulder to shoulder. And from this picture, even if you get up really close, gay people, straight people, cisgender, trans people, we all pretty much look alike. And we're all happy to celebrate with one another, with food, with fun, with music. Next slide, please. Been a long struggle. And as much progress as we've made, we've still got a ways to go. And we can't do it without you. We don't want to be tolerated. You don't want to be tolerated. We want to live with one another in universal acceptance, no judgment. And for that, we need you to help us continue the fight. And we're agreed. We're not going to stop until we get there. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn this over now to Gordon for questions and answers.
Sorry about that. I'll try that again. I was muted. Thank you so much to Sherry, to Len, and to Mickey for an excellent presentation. What we'd like to do now is have some time for question and answer or comment and answer. And what I'm thinking is probably the best way to do this would be that if we could unmute folks and let them make a few comments. Also, we may wish to unshare the screen here so that things are, images are a little bit bigger. Thank you. Wow. Before we do this, I just want to share a personal story about GAAMC, to give you folks just a moment to maybe think about what your questions and thoughts might be. And part of the reason that I am as involved with GAAMC as I am is, well, to me, quite simple. I started going to GAAMC in 1978. There I met some of my closest friends whom I've ever met. And also through one of them in particular, who I talk to regularly and was just on the most recent GAAMC Zoom. Thanks to him, I happen to be married now and in a relationship with my husband, Javier Montalvo, for the last 27 years. And so that was just, when I think about how GAAMC has changed my life, really, 43 years of it are substantially different than they would have been had I not walked through the doors of the Unitarian Fellowship in 1978. So what I'd like to do is I just want to say a couple of people have shared their thank yous. Thank you so much for this presentation. Amazing work has been done by you all, and thank you for sharing this important history. If anybody would like to unmute and maybe ask a question or give a thought, we enjoy doing that. Well, we got one more coming in from Greg, which is, thank you so much for this presentation and for your sacrifices and work in New Jersey. And they do ask, is there a resource that chronicles the history of LGBTQIA+ owned establishments in the state of New Jersey? Would any of the three of you know about that, if there is something with that?
No, I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
One of the resources would be the Pride Guide, if you can get your hands on a copy. But I think that there is a listing most likely available through the NJ LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce.
Mm-hmm.
And I will see if I can locate the chamber's URL and put that in the chat for folks.
Great. Thank you, Sherry. Additionally, the Pride Guide was a publication that we put out up until 2017. And we actually still have an online version of it, which we are considering updating. Okay? So if you want to look there too at www.gaamic.org and then go to Pride Guide, you can find out also of some of the LGBTQ+ businesses that would be listed there. Anybody else have a question? By the way, Sherry has just put that information in the chat. Anybody else has a question, feel free to add it to the chat or to simply unmute and ask. Well, it looks like we may have answered all your questions. Oh, wait a minute. Got a couple coming up now. No. Still the same. Okay. So in that case, what I'll do is I will send things back to Anna. Anna, if you'd like to take over the mic, that'd be great.
Gordon, Greg
oh, thank you, Greg. There were a couple more questions that had come in.
Were there? Because I looked, these are the only ones I can see. Maybe I've got some more here. Let me keep on going down. Okay. There is, I belong to the chamber. If any LGBTQIA+ business owners and allies have questions until
That's me.
acceptance, and then trans and inclusive and law enforcement issues, BIPOC was also mentioned.
Jackie Spritzer, what are some of the issues that we're still working on now? And it's certainly enforcement of the implementation of the LGBTQ history, and also Gordon can speak to what's happening with the law on LGBTQ elders. Just a reminder that a lot of times our trans brothers and sisters who are people of color are more frequently targeted, not by all law enforcement, but by some. And so we need to put something into effect so that everyone feels safe in every space in New Jersey. And sometimes those of us who have privilege or a voice, it's up to us to raise our voice for the folks who cannot speak for themselves or are not listened to.
In answer to what Sherry was mentioning about the LGBTQ+ senior adults bill, this legislation is actually going to be started to be enforced as of September 9th, and it requires all long-term care institutions in New Jersey to have listed a Bill of Rights for LGBTQ plus older adults and people with HIV. It also requires training of all the people in these institutions within a year of the passage, or I should say the implementation of the bill. So we're extremely excited about that. And I can say at GAAMC and also at SAGE, which I also work with, there's going to be a lot of work to be done here to be able to train, because we have something like, there are about 700 different agencies involved. And it's going to be really a tremendous task, but a task that we're very, very excited about. Another question that came up, by the way, is that does New Jersey still have laws that criminalize HIV plus persons? To my knowledge, no, but I want to also put that out there to Mickey, to Sherry, and to Len.
Not as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not as far as I know, Gordon.
Yeah. One thing about that I want to say too is, and it was very important in the bill that I just talked about, that HIV plus persons were included. And part of the reason for that is that now over 50% of the people in the United States who are HIV positive are over 50 years old. So it is really necessary that long-term care institutions get their acts together regarding the special needs that these folks have. Okay. Let me take a little look again. Sorry, it's a little hard for me to see the chat here, but I will peek around, see if we've covered in all the questions.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think so. So now I'll give the mic back over to Anna. Thank you, Anna.
Gordon, Len, Mickey, and Sherry, thank you so much for taking the time to talk tonight.
Thank
We
you for the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. As we push forward to share the space that we live in, and just keep working towards representation, inclusion, equity. As we were talking about in the beginning, June is not the only month for Pride. It really is all year round, every day, every hour, just to keep moving forward. So thank you so much. And thank you for letting us record it so we can continue to share the story.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time and your invitation.
Yes.
Yes.
I would also say thank you very much to the participants here who have attended today's webinar. And if you want to find out more about GAAMC, you can go to www.gaamic.org, or you can email me at president@gaamic.org, and I'll gladly send you information about what we do.
Thank you so much, everyone, and have a lovely evening and continue to stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care,
Have
friends.
a good evening. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Visit us some Monday. Is Morristown
Yes.
Secretary and Fellowship.
For ice cream.